Mr. Eskobal, thank you very much for your time, sir. I really appreciate it. It's a great pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
What can you tell us from the meetings in the press before?
Yeah.
You met mostly with all the delegation. You even had the breakfast today with,
I did.
with the Balkan 6.
I did.
What's your impression of all the Balkans moving in the right direction, for instance?
Well, let me just start by saying that our position on the Western Balkans is they are an area of extreme opportunity. So we look at the Balkans not from the perspective of the 90s and the political problems that arose there, but of the 21st century and all of the energy, all of the youth, all of the entrepreneurial spirit, and all of the economic opportunities that it brings. That's the selling point for the Western Balkans. And I have to say that people around the table agreed with me, that it is an important part of Europe. And I have to say, it is part of Europe. So that's what we discussed.
But do they agree among themselves? I mean, the youth as such, I don't think that anyone would disagree with it, but do the politicians agree among themselves?
Well, I think everybody agrees on one thing, that the future of the Western Balkans is within the European Union and as part of the transatlantic community. So yes, we largely agree. The question is now, how do we operationalize that vision?
And who is to operationalize all that vision, sir?
Well,
themselves?
All of us. No, all of us have to do it. So the countries of the region have some homework to do. Okay. They have to make reforms. They have to prepare their publics and their institutions for integration. The European Union has to provide the roadmap, and the Americans to provide the backing for that. Okay. So I think in that regard, we all have a job to do.
But unfortunately, what we see in the Balkans is that there is a lot of that EU is asking from the countries. Look at for Macedonia, the name road. Yeah. We changed the name of the, and even the constitutional name, and even ourselves how we call ourselves nowadays. And now we have a different role with Bulgaria. It's veto, which is totally about the history and who does what and who represents what. So the same case scenario is with Bosnia, for instance. We have a lot of duties to accomplish, but at the end of the day, we see that the EU isn't delivering as fast as it promises.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would like to see that happen a lot faster. That doesn't mean that the issues that we deal with today in 2022 are going to be the ones that we deal with in 2025. But the important thing is that the path is going to be the same. So as long as we work together to do our own homework, that everybody does their piece, I think we'll get there. I'm very optimistic about the region. And by the way, the numbers, the economic numbers, tell a great story in this region. It is the fastest growing part of Europe with opportunities to lead in renewable energy, LNG, shipping, transportation, tourism, IT, education. So Europe needs the Western Balkans. America needs the Western Balkans. So the path is going to remain the same. The obstacles will change, but we got to stay focused.
Well, this sentence hasn't changed for 2 decades.
I know.
It hasn't.
Yeah.
It hasn't. We need the Western Balkans. They are at the heart of Europe. Yeah. They should join the European family, but the pace is extremely slow.
Well,
and the European EU skepticism is just growing.
I get it.
You heard the President Pendarovsky, he said it himself in his address.
I would look at it this way. There are a lot of metrics to measure progress. So I would say that the economics are one great way to do it. The strength of the institutions as well. If you look at what's happening in Albania, for example, with or without European integration, they have done an awful lot to combat corruption. So in other words, that was an initial goal, but then it became an internal goal. So in North Macedonia, the idea that you're deepening your relationships around the region, with or without the European, the specific European path, you're doing a fantastic job. You're showing a tremendous amount of leadership in bringing the region together, to raising solutions for Europe on certain issues. We just had a strategic bilateral dialogue with North Macedonia where we agreed on the way forward on a lot of things, from energy to refugees to support for Ukraine. So it's not just about the specific IGC. This process has brought a tremendous amount of progress for the region, and we should stay on that path.
Right, since you mentioned it, there's a new initiative. It used to be the mini Schengen, you know it by heart, and now it's called the Open Balkan, not Balkans, but Balkan. So what do you make out of it? It's not inclusive. Everyone is arguing about it's not inclusive. Kosovo should join, it should try, it should not try. So what is the overall picture that you see it from your perspective, sir?
My view and the position of my government is that we support all efforts to bring the region closer together. We support Berlin, the Common Regional Market, the RCC, the CEFTA, and the Open Balkan. The point is...
Which are more or less EU-led processes besides the Open Balkans.
Right, and so this one is EU compliant. Now, that's the condition of our support. One is it should be open to all the countries of the Western Balkans, including Kosovo, as a full member, as a fully recognized member. And two, that it should not...
Is it or not?
Well, according to the statements of the leaders, it is.
Okay.
And so I take them at their word. They haven't shown me that it isn't. And the conference that was held here last week was the message was pretty clear. It was an invitation for all of them to band together. So there are some advantages to every one of the processes, and we support all of them as long as they bring you closer to Europe and closer together. Now, this is important because 70% of the economy of the Western Balkans is linked to Europe. Yes, the other 30%, for the most part, is a link to your neighbors. So you need both. So it should be EU compliant, and it should be open to all of them.
In your address last week, I was following up. You said it should remain economical.
It absolutely should remain economical.
Why did you mention it?
Well, I mentioned that because people are skeptical.
It tends to be as well political, or it's because we see it much more as a political.
Yes, but it's a political initiative intended to improve the investment climate, and it should really be focused on creating economic opportunities, because that's where the future is. Now, the reason I said it should not be political is that it should not make statements about how the political organization in individual countries should be. It should not be political in terms of the relationship between Serbia and Kosovo. It should not be political in terms of linkages between ethnic groups across boundaries. It should be about removing the boundaries. And so that is, if you start to talk about the political issues, you're going to find obstacles. And, by the way, the message of the 21st century is about the phenomenal economic growth of the region. If you start talking about the political questions, then people who don't know the Balkans the way I do are going to start remembering the 90s. And that's not a good look for the region.
Right. What do you make of Kosovo then, and Bosnia staying outside of the Open Balkans, and Montenegro, sorry?
Well, look,
as of now,
our position on all of this, again, is that we support the economic and political integration of the region. Full stop. And by the way, I've told people, you want to stop discussing whether it should be Berlin or CEFTA or Open Balkans. The answer to that is European integration, European Union membership. So that's the answer in the end. So this is just a tool to get us there, hopefully.
Hopefully. And what do we make of Serbia still not having imposed sanctions to Russia? So Ambassador Hill was quite clear last week.
Yeah. Well, look, there are a couple of things here. Number one, I think that Russia's aggression in Ukraine should not be without consequence. And we, as a community that is united basically in values, because our community is all about values, has an important statement to make. And we have to operationalize those values through sanctions. So it is the position of the United States and the European Union that those countries that want to be part of our community have to have an affirmative stance on this issue. And sanctions is one of them. Now, that's not just coming from me, that's coming from the European Union. And if Serbia is truly an aspirant country, they have legally binding obligations to align. So that's where our position is.
How late is Serbia?
How late?
How late is Serbia on imposing the sanctions?
Well, look, I think
Since aspirations are public, for sure. But their acts, I mean, not that we see it.
I would not say that they are where we would like them to be. And I'll leave it at that.
You leave it at that, all right. Serbia and Kosovo dialogue.
Yes.
Because I'm running out of time. You're very busy, and I appreciate your time, sir. They have more than 30 agreements signed among them. Not all of them are implemented. Right. One of the biggest obstacles seen as of now was and still is the association of Serb municipalities in Kosovo. Mr. Palmer last year said that it has to be delivered by the Kosovan authorities, and they have to accomplish what they have signed for. So now there is plenty of talks in Kosovo. Is it constitutional? It's unconstitutional? Is it the third powers, or it's not? How can the West make Kosovo believe in what it has signed?
Okay.
Because as of now, it doesn't believe in it.
No, I understand.
Otherwise, it would implement it.
Right. This is a very complicated question. But let me start by saying that the EU facilitated dialogue, which is very strongly supported by the United States, will unlock the potential of the region. It'll unlock the path for Serbia, and it'll unlock the future for Kosovo. And the goal is to get them both into the European structures. Within that dialogue, there's an awful lot of technical and pragmatic questions that have to be answered, that have to be resolved. Energy, missing persons, license plates, travel documents. The EU-led dialogue is the format in which they can resolve these, and it has shown the value. It has shown a lot of support and a lot of results. Now, when we talk about the Association of Serb Municipalities, the reason that it should be implemented is that it was agreed to fundamentally, and so we have to figure out what that would look like within the context of what other similar agreements and other similar structures in Europe are. And Miroslav Lajčák has told both sides that he has some thoughts as to how you can make this compliant with European structures.
Okay.
And I think there are some. And by the way, there is an Association of Serb Municipalities in Croatia, which is almost not needed anymore because they're part of the European Union.
Yeah, well, but Belgrade never controlled the Serbs in Croatia, for instance, but it still controlled the Serbs in Kosovo. And I mean, very honest, Serbs in Kosovo, in Bosnia, and in Montenegro.
Right.
And it has its say in forming in the government in those different countries.
Our position is that anything that gets implemented through the dialogue should not affect Kosovo's independent sovereignty, territorial integrity, or functionality.
Okay.
So there are many models within the context of Europe that we could follow.
Indeed.
And we intend to provide some examples of that for them.
In the next few months, days, weeks?
Weeks.
In a week's time. Okay.
I mean, we don't want the dialogue to last another decade.
Okay. When it should end then? Because there is no, when it started, like after 2009, after the Ahtisaari plan.
But I would like to see it within the mandate of Mr. Lajčák.
Okay, but Mr. Lajčák, we had him on the record yesterday as well, sir. And he said that the Ahtisaari plan, the comprehensive Ahtisaari plan, which solved the status issue, as such failed. Otherwise, you wouldn't have these talks now.
I wouldn't say failed. I would have
Me
said...
neither, but he said it.
No, but look, it set us out in a good path, I would say. Is it applicable today under changed situations? I don't know. I mean, we have to constantly adapt to new conditions. I mean, February 24th gave us some new conditions to think about. It gave us a real understanding of why we're a community. Okay. NATO once again focused on European security. European Union once again focused on freedom and human rights. So, we have some opportunities right now. We should take advantage of them.
Okay. Very last one. What do you make of Russia's approach to the region?
It has never been a great one, let me tell you. We talk a lot about malign Russian influence. Now, the first thing I have to say is that Russia isn't present in any positive ways. They don't provide any humanitarian assistance. They don't provide capacity building. They don't provide humanitarian assistance. And second, they do so selectively. So they are willing to divide, for example, Serbs away from the Federation. They're willing to provide misinformation. I saw a tweet yesterday where Lavrov said that the assistance that we're providing Ukraine is ending up in the black market arms of Kosovo and Albania. That's factually false. That's misinformation. That's disinformation that's directed at people in the region to try to divide them. So what do I think about Russia's influence in the region? Not good.
Not good. And to that extent, still Russia talks a lot, and about Kosovo especially. We had President Putin talking 4 or 5 times, mentioning Kosovo in a press conference a week ago.
Right.
And we had President Dodik who went actually and visited him. Then we have President Vucic who couldn't go because he was supposed to be elsewhere. And we see these ties, and then we don't understand exactly as to what country represent which values. And as such, which is the biggest satellite or proxy of Russia in our neighborhood?
Well, look, I think it's unhelpful to label people as proxies.
Is there any?
Well, there are people who have been closer to Russia at different times in their political careers than other times. And at every time that we see it, we raise it, we oppose it. We encourage them to fully align with their European obligations. And in some cases, when it's malign, we sanction it. So
Indeed.
we're very clear about it, but I don't want to paint people with a broad brush. I do want to say that our relationship with the countries of the region is not zero-sum. So we want to have a good relationship with every country in the Western Balkans, and we're moving in that direction. And I would have to say that we are finding that we have more and more influence, and by we, I mean the Europeans and Americans, every day over those that don't wish the region well.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank
I
you
really
very much.
appreciate it, sir.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it. Thank you very much.